And today we're talking about anger and hatred, because this is an issue that a lot of us wrestle with. We really wrestle with anger, and so we'll put on this fake face where we will smile at people, but inside we are raging. Inside we're saying, I hate your stupid, ugly face. I just want you to shrivel up and die. But on the outside, we're like, hey, good to see you. And this happens in the church, and this happens in the civilian world also. It's not just a Christian problem, it's a human problem, where we put on this fake, hypocritical front, and inside we are seething with anger and hate. Now, anger is a natural emotional response. I'm not saying don't get angry. Even St. Paul in the Bible never says you may not be angry. What Paul does say is that in your anger, don't sin. So there's a difference between anger as an emotion and then that going too far into sinful behavior. So we're not saying don't be angry. We're not saying anger is wrong. It is a normal response to a lot of things that we go through. However, left unchecked, anger can get us into destructive behaviors. It can damage us. It can damage our relationships. Anger unchecked can lead to hatred and resentment. So we've got to check ourselves and make sure that we are not letting our anger run amok, so that we can be spiritually, emotionally, relationally happy and healthy. So we're going to look at Matthew chapter 5, starting at verse 21. This is Jesus speaking here. You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. So Jesus here is starting to do a form of sermon that we see a lot through this section in Matthew, where he says, you have heard it said, and he brings up an old way of talking about sinful behavior. And then he says, but I say to you. He says, it used to be this, now I'm updating it for believers now. And the biggest difference that Jesus is trying to get us to understand is the difference between behavior versus our heart. Behavior versus the heart. And so he kicks off here in verse 21, you have heard that it was said, you shall not murder. That's behavior. Most of us can agree that murder ain't cool. Anybody cool with murder? I didn't think so. Right? We could even do a segment on it. Is murder wrong? Yep. Murder is not cool. Murder is always wrong. And so we don't need the law to tell us that murder is wrong. We can all agree murder is wrong. But that is an actual physical behavior. Jesus says, let's kick it up a notch. Now it's not just about the outward behavior, the action. Now it's about your inward life, your thoughts and emotions that no one can see except you and God. He says, it used to be don't murder, but I'm going to tell you this. Check your heart. Do you hate your fellow human being? Because in our heart, we murder people all the time, even though we smile at them. Jesus says it's not about the outward action anymore. Now it's about the condition of your heart. You see, anger has a destructive power if left unchecked. So much so that St. Paul tells us in Ephesians that we should not let the sun go down on our anger. that we should work to reconcile before the day is over and not let anger fester within us. That suggests that we should be pursuing timely conflict resolution, not just let things go on and on and on and on and on. Anger, if unchecked, leads to spiritual and relational decay. So we have to acknowledge when we are wrestling with anger and then ask God to help us deal with it in a healthy, godly way. And Jesus goes on to talk about that in his call to reconciling with people. He goes on in verse 23. If you are offering your gift at the altar, now what does that mean? That means it's church time. So for the Jewish people, they would have gone to the temple and they would have brought their gift or their sacrifice to place at the altar. And we can bring that into a modern Christian understanding. If you're at church, about to go into worship, that is our offering as we bring our worship. If you're offering your gift at the altar and remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift at the altar and go and be reconciled. Don't try to get into church if you've got beef with somebody else. That's kind of like a modern paraphrase, all right? But you understand what I'm saying. If you've got something going on that is blocking your relationship with a brother or sister in Christ, Jesus is saying, don't try to do church if you've got this between you. It is more important first to go reconcile that relationship. Get right with each other before you try to get right with God. Because how can we come before God and say, God, I love you so much. I want to be right with God, but you still got this going on against your brother or your sister. Jesus says, let's put the things in the right order here, not put the cart before the horse. You got issues with your brother or sister, go make it right. Then come and get right with God. We can't get right with God if we're not going to get right with other people. Because Christianity is twofold. It's not just about us and God, it's about us and other people. We cannot be right with God if we're going to treat other people like garbage. And the gospel is crystal clear on this, and I cannot emphasize it enough. If we are not treating each other well, we are missing half the point of the gospel. At the same time, if we're right with other people, but we're not right with God, we're missing the other half. There's a balancing act in our spirituality and our faith. Authentic, genuine faith is about being right with each other and being right with God. And when we are balanced like that, then we know we are living the kind of life that God has called us to live. And so Jesus tells us, embrace reconciliation. Paul tells us in Colossians, as much as it is possible with you, live at peace with one another. And to bear one another's burdens, forgiving each other as Jesus forgave us. Now, a big piece of letting go of our anger is pursuing forgiveness. And this is tough. It is even harder, especially harder, that's for you. It's harder when the people are not apologetic or repentant. If someone has wronged us and they never own up to it, Jesus still calls us to pursue forgiveness and reconciliation. Ain't that a punch in the gut? You see, someone doesn't have to apologize for wronging you for you to work on forgiving them. Now that goes against everything in our human nature, doesn't it? If someone wrongs me, I will hold on to that grievance until I grow old and die. I don't want to let go of that. And if they apologize, then I'll think about forgiving them. I'll think about it. Not a guarantee. But if they come and they grovel and they let me know how sorry they are, I'll consider forgiving them. And Paul says that's not right. That's not the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to forgive people the same way that Jesus forgave us. Now think about that for a second. What did you do to earn God's forgiveness? What have you guys done recently to earn God's forgiveness? Anybody good enough to earn God's forgiveness? No, you can't earn it. You haven't deserved it. No one can be good enough. We talked about that last week. How long can you be good? Maybe a minute. Can you stretch that to a full 24 hours? Probably not. A week? Absolutely not. I am not that good of a person, no matter how hard I try. That's why God's grace is so important. Grace covers what we can't do. And Paul says very clearly, in the same way that God forgave us, we have to practice forgiveness to others. And that is one way that we let go of unhealthy anger. That is one way that we make sure we are not harboring hatred in our heart. We practice forgiveness in the same way that Jesus forgave us. Even up on the cross, Jesus was practicing forgiveness and grace. He says, "Father, forgive them, for they don't understand what they are doing." Now, think about your life for a second. This is not rhetorical. Flashback at your life. The last week, the last month, the last year, last 5 years. There's probably been someone in your life that has wronged you or hurt you or offended you in some way. I'm going to give you all a second. Like I said, this is not rhetorical. I want you to picture a specific person who has done you wrong in your life. Everybody got someone in mind? He's a real jerk, isn't he? Right? Yeah. I appreciate your honesty. Yeah. Real turd. We don't like this person at all. Now, has Jesus forgiven that person? Crap. Yes. Has Jesus forgiven you? Crap. Yes. Does Jesus want you to work on forgiving that person? Son of a gun. Yes. You see, Jesus calls us to embrace reconciling with other people. The path to peace begins with a heart that is working to reconcile and make things right. To seek forgiveness when we have hurt people, and to offer forgiveness when people have hurt us. That's what Jesus is talking about here. We can let go of that destructive, unhealthy anger when we pursue forgiveness and an attitude of reconciliation. So we've got to cultivate this, not just as a one-time act, but a continuous journey. As I said just a second ago, Paul tells us to, as much as it is possible with us, live at peace with everybody. Jesus said, we looked at the Beatitudes a few weeks ago, blessed are the peacemakers. That means living in forgiveness and grace, pursuing peace and reconciliation. That means embracing a lifestyle of empathy and forgiveness and looking at people through a godly lens, trying to see them the way that God sees them. The same way that God loves us, we are supposed to love each other. And that's really hard. We live in a society that is fragmented and fighting with each other. This year, we're at the beginning of February, and it feels like we've already been through a whole year, right? 2025 is the longest year on record, right? We're only like 30 some days into it, and it feels like we've been in 2025 for months. It's long. It's long. And we have seen so many people at each other's throats. I have seen too many Christians leading the way of hatred and animosity and contention. And this is not the way of Christ. Jesus calls us to be peacemakers, to be people of empathy, compassion, pursuing forgiveness and grace. You have heard that it was said, you shall not murder, but that's not good enough anymore. Jesus says, now check your heart, check your attitude. Is there anger and hatred that you are letting build up? And it is time to let that wash away. And I will tell you, my friends, it ain't easy. And Jesus never said it was easy, but that is the way that we are called to be. In the same way that Christ has forgiven us, we have to pursue that with other people. So the question comes down to then, how do we work on forgiving and practicing grace with other people? And one of my favorite coping skills when dealing with someone who has, got an issue with you is called the like me skill. And you just put that person that you've got beef with in your shoes and you in theirs. And you say, this person has gone through some tough times like me. This person wrestles with insecurity like me. This person has anger issues like me. This person is uncertain of the future like me. When we start doing this like me game and we see other people the same way that we see ourselves, it can help repair the bridge between us. Because anger and hatred creates a distance. And Jesus is saying it's time to build the bridge back, to repair relationships. If we are going to be followers of Jesus, we have to work on repairing things, not keeping people at a distance. So we can ask, how is this person like me? How has their life been like mine to bring us to the point that we are at, like me? Second thing you can do, spend some honest, genuine time reflecting and meditating. If you're feeling anger, ask, why really am I angry? What is the trigger that is causing this anger and hatred? Not just the surface level, but like deep down, what is the root? You can even think about it like an elevator. If you're at the top floor of a building, and you're like, I'm angry, and you're going to push the down button. You're going to drop down the floor below. What is underneath the anger that is lifting it up? And then when you think, oh, if I'm going to go down a floor, this is what I'm really angry about. Then you push the down button again. It's like, we're going to go down through it again. What is underneath that? And we keep putting in the work to really get down and see, what am I angry about? What is the real root cause of what I'm going through? And we will realize that a lot of our anger, the surface level stuff, has a much deeper root to it. And that's what we got to start attacking. And we can let that go. Spend some genuine time reflecting and meditating. Finally, seek additional help. If you need to reconcile with someone and you're just not finding a way to do it, find a mediator. I mean, there are professional mediators who can help, but find a neutral party. Say, hey, can you help us work through this? It can be a leader in your shop that you trust. It can be a friend, a family member. It can be a chaplain or a minister, but find an outside neutral party to say, hey, can you help us come to a place where we can resolve this? Our goal, our calling, is to be peacemakers in this world and to practice forgiveness in the same way that Jesus has forgiven us. And this is a huge leap of faith for us, to say, I'm going to be a peacemaker and I'm going to be intentional from now on to resolve conflicts, to let go of my anger and to move forward in peace, in grace, and forgiveness. But this is exactly who we are called to be. My challenge to you guys this week is that you can learn to walk in forgiveness and to let go of anger. Now, I'm not stupid. I'm not. I know that Marines have a real hard time with anger. Like 95% of the Marine Corps is angry. You guys live on hate. That's just like, it fuels the Marine Corps. I got it. And it's real tough to be a Christian in the Marine Corps Because when we live in an environment that thrives on hate and anger, we are called to be different. So we are really called to be countercultural. When the culture says, this is just the way we are, Christians say, doesn't matter where I'm working or where I'm serving, Jesus calls me to be different. We are called to be people of peace and reconciliation and forgiveness. So when I say your challenge this week is to move forward in forgiveness and let go of hate and anger, I know it's a big ask. I get it. I get it. But that doesn't change the words of Christ, who calls us to be people who love others well, to let go of the anger, and to practice forgiveness. You guys willing to give it a shot this week? I ask you all to think of a person that has done you wrong. I want you this week to try in your heart to move in forgiveness, even if they have never apologized, even if you never talk to them about it. We can still move in forgiveness in our hearts and our spirits, to let go of the anger that is building up and find the path of Christ, because that's the better way. Would you pray with me?